At least a few more people showed up to dampen the sound. Hi, my name is Brad Crochet. I work for Red Hat, and I'm Thrash on IRC, and I'm here to give the Mistral project update, as the PTL could not make it. So we'll get started. So what does Mistral do? Is everyone, I know you're familiar with Mistral. Is everyone already familiar with Mistral in the room? Do you know what it does? Okay. So it's workflows as a service, basically. You can create tasks and workflows and actions to be taken on your cloud. And so you send up your workflow definition, and then you can execute that workflow. It can interact with any number of different services from the OpenStack ecosystem. It was founded in the Havana release of OpenStack. We've had about 70 contributors in this past cycle. So that, pretty healthy developer base. We're deployed on about 5% of the clouds out there, and it's been used in all OOO deployments since Newton. We use it as basically as an API that our UI and CLI can call, so we don't end up having to implement things twice, in both like JavaScript and Python, for instance. So some of the key features from Queens, the Custom Actions API, it was an initiative that was started in Pike and was solidified in Queens. It basically decoupled the Actions API from the main repo. So that way you can, you didn't have to depend on the big, the whole thing. So you could just pull in the Mistral library. We have some new YAML and JSON functions that you can use in YACL, because you can use YACL in your workflows. And so if you need to, say, store something in Swift, pull it out of Swift, and be able to parse it and then do something else with it in your workflow, we now have that capability. Workflow and action names can now be set dynamically with the YACL or Jinja 2 expression. Workflow execution creation can be idempotent now by providing Mistral with the ID. And as per the Queens community goals, we support policy in code and Zool v3. And then we also added workflow namespaces, which allows workflows and workflow executions to be grouped together. So that was a good feature. So some more features from Queens, the cron trigger execution interval. This was one that really helped triple O out a lot. We were finding that the undercloud, even when it was basically idle, was consuming a lot of CPU, and it was because the execution interval was, it was executing at the second level, as opposed to, I think we bumped it up to 10 seconds maybe, and that really reduced a whole lot of the overhead there. Because if you don't need your cron triggers to fire with a resolution of a minute or something, then there's no point in checking every minute. So it at least gives the operator the ability to set that. You can now start a workflow based on an old execution, so you don't have to necessarily give all the parameters again. So if you had a lot of parameters to your workflow, you can just give it, hey, I just want to run this execution again, and it'll execute it with the same parameters and everything. It'll create a new execution, so it'll have its own execution entry, but you can, like I said, you can base it on that previous execution. And you can now filter based on the root execution ID. The root execution ID was implemented so that when you're looking through the output your actions, your tasks, and whatnot. There was no, and mainly sub workflow calls. It was hard to determine which execution it came from, and so now this root execution ID is attached to things so that you know, okay, these sub workflow calls were a part of this larger overarching execution. Okay, so some things that are already merged in Rocky. Execution events and notifications. We've got there's a new plugin, basically another server service that has a way for doing notifications. New OpenStack actions for Swift. I believe that was the Swift service implementation. And then for Vitrage, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Chenling, thank you, and Zune, or I think it's Zune. Yeah, so task defaults can now be set. Can now set the safe rerun policy, so you can specify that a workflow is safe to be rerun. Added support for PyMini-Racer. Workflow executions can't be deleted while they're running unless you force it, because that could leave you, that's obviously a bad thing, I would think. We had some work done on the refactoring the Docker development container, that we could just some of the Docker file stuff that we have in repo, for getting a development environment up and going. I think there's even some Docker Compose files in there, so it makes it easy to, it takes care of, a Rabbit, a MySQL, and then installs Mistral. And some performance improvements, configurable action definition caching, and reduce the memory footprint. All right, and some of the things that we've got in flight right now, switching to using keystone trusts by default in the OpenStack actions. If you're not familiar with how Mistral does that, it has an action generator that we go and do an inspection of all of the APIs that we know about, and we create custom actions for them. So that way you don't have to worry, you don't have to write a new action, whatever. But right now it's using just a session, and if you have a long-running action, it could if it's longer than your token expiration, then it stops working. So that's not good. And we ran into that in Triple O. I think it was something on the undercloud, but workflow error analysis. That's again, it kind of ties back into that root execution ID. This is something so that you can say, okay, I want to know everything about this execution that occurred and why did it fail, and it'll go through and it'll instead of because right now what you have to do is you have to find your execution, you have to then see what actions were in that, and these are all individual command line calls, and this would put all that into a single command line call and say, what did this execution look like? It'll show you all the sub workflows, the tasks, the actions, and any errors that were associated with those. An example project with custom Mistral actions, the initial version of Mistral Extra, which is where eventually the OpenStack action generation stuff and all of that code associated is going to end up in the Mistral Extra. Mainly because Mistral we're trying not to necessarily depend on OpenStack. So you can it's because it is useful as a general workflow service, and can be used outside of an OpenStack ecosystem. And we also have some Ansible action, Ansible to call an Ansible playbook from within a Mistral workflow. Again, heavily used in Triple O. And of course, we got some documentation improvements in refactoring. And then beyond Rocky, we're looking at integration with other services, Kubernetes or Ansible's Tower or AWX, the open source side of Tower. And of course, stability and performance are always going to be on everyone's roadmap. But we're also looking at HA and making have the ability to have more than one Mistral server and not have to worry about your engine going down because somebody else can pick that up. So where you can find us, IRC, hashtag OpenStack-Mistral. And we have kind of we used to have a weekly meeting, and we went to a more office hour type thing. And so we have those three different times so that we can kind of get global, coverage on that. So that way, someone's always on at one of those times to kind of answer questions and whatnot. All right. Any questions? No? Oh, okay.
So one of the interesting things about trust is you can't create a trust from a trust token. So if you're making all the calls using trust, is there some way to opt out for calls that may themselves need to create a trust?
I don't know yet. It's still we're still in the I'm the one that's working on it. I don't know yet.
Okay.
So I mean,
that's something to think about.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think we'll have it. It'll be trust by default. But if you want to flip a flag and say use just a access token.
There's also the service user idea, which is like you validate when the user token first comes in, but then you have API calls that you make that you include that token. It's going to ignore the fact that it's expired.
Uh-huh.
It goes along with the service user to perform the operation, which is also for dealing with this kind of stuff. So that's another way that we could potentially get around.
Okay.
Using that. That might be a better way.
Yeah, I agree. Okay.
On the trust thing, wait, hold on, stop for a second. And on the trust thing, there is the idea that you can reallocate a trust to somebody else. And so in a lot of those cases, it might be that you don't want to create a new trust, but you want to be able to, what's the word we use for that? You know what I'm talking about, right? You can redelegate a trust. And you
Yes.
how many times you want. So for these kind of workloads, if it comes in from a trust token, it might be you also set make sure you create the trust token so it can be redelegated once. And somebody's
Right.
redelegating it to Mistral so that it can use that second level for whatever it's doing there. So there might be some stuff that we can do that way as well.
I'd like. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, because we can talk about implementation details.
Policy thing. So you're saying you can policy and code. Were you aware or diligent to make sure that when you did that every call actually checked not just that you had a project scope token, but that there was an appropriate role in there?
I don't think so.
Okay, because there's interesting. One of these guys did what's called the banana test, which is he created a role called banana.
Uh-huh.
To be able to do nothing, and then he went to see what APIs he could call with that. And so you go to an API, you want to be limited to a member, but if you have the banana role, you can get in there. So it's a way of checking that everything. Because the big thing is the big push towards getting a read-only role,
Right.
and stuff like that. And so the whole idea that in the policy you have to check all this different stuff, including the role check, and it drives me nuts. I try to pull it out into middleware so we can get that off your.
Yeah.
But there's a potential tweak cleanup that we need to do with it.
Okay.
You're not alone. That's going to be a project like that. Yeah.
I think in Mistral it's handled by the context, so it's automated for every API call.
Yeah.
There's a central place where we extract some stuff from the incoming requests, and I think the policy checks are not there.
Yeah.
So yeah, we probably should test it.
Yeah. We should probably look at it.
Go through it with you. I didn't realize that the policy and code thing was taking off and that others were doing it, so.
Yeah.
I'm just asking the question to make people aware now, we can work forward with it.
Okay.
The whole admin anywhere is admin everywhere type thing.
Right.
Code that was a project like Go or ASA runs thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Not everyone has done that thing. That's got to be thanks project like Go.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank y'all for coming. I appreciate it.